Everybody had their shots.
I have.
Shot. You don't have your shots.
No.
Oh, you're
No
one of the
shot for you, Josh?
non-conformance guys. 'Cause
You
you're
guys
afraid
are
of
just
that.
young pups. What?
I've had it
You
twice.
got yours?
What's that?
COVID.
Good.
Or have you?
I think I am too.
Well, aren't you a lucky duck?
Yeah.
Once wasn't enough?
Yeah, I'm
I
clear.
guess not.
Easy,
First
bro.
time, it would have been, it was that week.
Did you get
we shut
vaccinated,
down
Joe?
in March.
You
Yeah.
Did you get vaccinated?
I was.
Did you get vaccinated?
I've had mine done, I got.
Did you
Then
get a
I
shot?
had the cough.
Did you get
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
vaccine?
For a
I was
month.
done,
It would not go away.
I'm good.
This
Me too.
time, I lost the taste and smell.
I
I
had Johnson
had
Johnson's, it was
horrible
one time
headache for a
deal.
week.
One and done.
And then I was okay.
I still
But-
can't smell some things.
Well, I guess you've got the antibodies. You should try marketing your blood now.
Exactly. Well, I still have a
She's on her
horrible
way.
taste in my mouth.
Really?
I can't, I describe it as like rotten garlic is what it feels like
Lovely.
all the time. It is the most miserable thing. And I can't, like, no, you can't smell it, so there's no like, I don't know, it's just awful. Absolutely terrible.
Have them in.
Well, that's what I said. Can I just like come in for a time? What do I need to do here? I'm back.
You are?
I know.
About 2 minutes.
Yes,
Name is was pull up
I did.
Less if Mr.
Can I
Jones
get a
wants it.
nameplate?
permanent spot for you.
I feel like I belong.
It's on live.
I
That's
should have a
already on
nameplate.
YouTube. Trust me.
Get your phone on silent. We should be live on YouTube at the moment.
They're probably behind that shutter.
Is it dark in here on purpose?
Mood.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Now we can't nap.
About, yeah, I know. And there, he said he was gonna check with Todd Schaefer there.
Nice.
See, a big rig can be parked on another guy.
Well, you can do that, except.
I'll call it.
If you're obstructing.
If I was smarter, I would have done this.
You can't just, you know,
I
I'm
think
gonna
it
put
says.
my rig out there.
I can kick off.
And so he gets up in the morning.
I started
and
my
goes off and gets
no
up.
soda
As a summer, like on
that I usually
JV.
start in the spring
Yes.
through the summer.
Yes,
An Arizona.
yes.
Blows my running times.
Just
I think she's
And
in
now I'm really missing.
Bill
What
or whatever.
kind of idiot would do this
She's
thing?
going to sit for the whole council meeting.
Sean,
You know,
John,
Deb Edwards,
Sean, Jeff.
she's the one that.
Got it.
Yeah, yeah.
I've had this before.
Keep an eye on it.
Got it.
And I said.
I keep an eye.
In fact, I'll cheat.
Check with Todd.
John, Sean.
No.
Got it.
You do, baby.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right, we'll be getting underway in about 10 seconds.
Okay.
9, 8. Good evening, and welcome to the Defiance City Council meeting for tonight, April 6th, 2021. Before we get underway, Mr. Corbett, would you open us up in prayer?
I will, sir. Heavenly Father, we're just thankful for this glorious day you blessed us with in Defiance. And God, it's nice to see spring finally showing up where the weather's warming up and we can go outside and just enjoy your creation. God, we thank you for the men and women that are in this room right now that have a heart to serve this community. And as we do that tonight, we just ask that you bless us with wisdom. And God, just whatever we do in this room, just let it give you the glory and honor tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Let the record show that all members of council are present this evening. Would you stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any liaison meeting requests or reports? And do we have any comments from council this evening?
Mr. President.
Mr. Corbett.
I have a couple. First, I'd like to just give a thank you out to our first responders, both police and fire. Josh and I had the privilege a week and a half ago to attend a Tunnel to Tower presentation to a Gold Star family that moved or chose Defiance for their home. And we had a great showing, and police and fire were there to support the family. I know they really appreciate it. So I wanted to say thanks to them, and I also want to just welcome Grace and Callum Kreischer to our community. They chose Defiance as their place to be. So we're glad that they're here, and it was just a great event. So thanks to Tunnel to Tower for giving them that mortgage-free home. So it's a very good event. Also, Josh and I guess we do a lot of things together here for some reason, attended a Pillar Team Zoom meeting and was very productive. But the conversation came back to they're very interested in getting back into the conversation about how to promote the city of Defiance digitally. I know we started that before the COVID shutdown. I think I've seen some Border Control minutes where maybe that conversation has started again. Also, there's been some interest that Defiance High School's Defiance News Network, maybe we can get involved to help promote the city, give those kids a goal to work on and a chance to hone their skills in their media program. I believe Christie's talked to Mr. Morton and he's excited. So more to come on that. More to come on what are the administration's working on, and whenever the time is correct, I'd like to probably have a study session with our public relations group and our council as a whole. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? Mrs. Crutch.
I attended the DCC board yesterday, and they were excited about getting the new program out for the Strady Center. Going to be coming out probably mid-May, starting for the fall. Some of the concert series, the Band and More series will be coming out, and of course, music in the parks. I was also glad to hear that many of you stopped into the DVB to see the mural, and the other mural that's in the alleyway will be starting sometime soon since the weather's getting nicer. So, oh, and the movies have been starting up on Saturday too, at the Strady.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments from council? No? All right. We'll move on to the Board of Control. Mayor McCann.
Thank you, President McMaster. Few things. I believe sometime recently, last week or the week before, we asked permission to invite the CAD class from Defiance High School in to show council the renderings that they've developed for the two roundabouts in a small park area out near the school campus. And they've given us a tentative date of May 4th for that presentation. And they'll be in early to get set up, and council can maybe wander about, and then they would plan on doing their presentation right at 7 o'clock. So as long as that date works for you folks, we will communicate that back.
That should work just fine.
Okay. And then I just want to thank Mrs. Westfall's second grade class out at Holy Cross. We spent about an hour today with them on a Zoom call and talked about all kinds of things. I can tell you that second grade class is also passionate about getting a Chick-fil-A here in Defiance. And so, we talked about a lot of things. They appreciate the work that we are doing in the parks. And I just enjoyed, like I say, almost an hour that we spent together. And I'm anxious for next year when we can have those meetings once again in person. So sometime last week, Mr. Helberg called me from the newspaper about a release that we had received on crime rates here in the state of Ohio, and we were very proud and pleased to be ranked 19th in the state. But it was interesting then over the weekend, I read an article in a newspaper, and the article basically talked about, and so these are just words of caution, that thieves have figured out that areas of low crime, members of that community become complacent. That they think because it's a low crime area, they don't need to lock your car, but you do. You don't need to take your keys, but you do. You shouldn't have to worry about leaving valuables out in plain sight, but you do. And don't need to lock your house, but again, you do. We know all those things, but again, you say, well, this is a low crime rate town, we shouldn't have to do those things. I just want to caution people that they should continue to be diligent when it comes to crime. And I believe from there, I will read from my book, and this is Carter. Carter wants to be a police officer. Carter, a police officer is what I want to be. My grandpa is a police officer, and I want to be one too. I will help people cross roads and help in any way possible. Well, that's from Carter. And for now, sir, that is all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I'd like to inform council that as we move forward in planning and the summer months, I think it's important to note that you may have read in the newspaper where some of the surrounding communities around us are having trouble getting lifeguards for their pools. Well, we're no different. We've had a lot of trouble getting a staff together for the pools this summer. And in talking with Mr. Sarrigan and Mr. Zedike, I've informed them we've reached out to the schools, the high schools in the surrounding area, and we'll continue to do so. But there will come a point in time, and I'm hopeful that we're a large enough community that we can actually try to secure the necessary people to keep it open and operational for most of the summer. If not, we certainly will have to look at maybe modifying hours depending upon the workforce that we have. It's important to note that these people need to be certified in CPR, and they need to have the necessary credentials to actually work at the pool. But look, we're just having a lot of problems with getting help. And I don't know if it's just an issue where we've come off a pandemic and we closed the pool last year and we're just not seeing those same faces around. I don't know if we're seeing cultural changes where just, kids at that age aren't interested in that kind of work anymore. But either way, we're going to be reaching out over the next couple of weeks, getting a bit more aggressive and still working with the schools to try to get the necessary help in here. But I certainly felt that was important to convey to you.
What you pay the lifeguards, is that anything that we need to look at where we can basically be greater in competition than other?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes. And you also have to realize, because we've had these conversations, that we've got full-time staffing that wouldn't necessarily command some of the prices that these people might want as well, believe it or not. And I think we have to be sensitive to some of those issues as well. So I think we need to take an overall look at just the pay and what it is and where we're at. And, we've talked about, you've seen in the news the $15 an hour minimum wage. That's, obviously at the forefront of, our community, this country, period. But I think in doing that, Joe, careful, because it sort of has a ripple effect on some other things as well. But certainly I think we have to look at that and determine whether or not we're going to up the amount of pay, that's something that would entice people, certainly. But if you want a summer swimming program, and, you know, we do, and I think that we want to make sure that the kids in this community have a place to go in the summertime, because it's always been an issue for a very long time, making sure that that pool's open and available to them. We might have to do that.
A lot of times it's what you call it, so, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes you might have to, because of the temporary increase, sometimes call it pandemic,
Yeah.
pay or some sort that can later be looked at. And we do create we do get some normalcy if that ever happens, but.
Yeah, I think we'll be talking about a lot of different wages, especially for seasonal help. And we talked about that, trying to get people in here to just help run our programs in the summertime. It doesn't necessarily have to be lifeguards. It can be just our seasonal help that helps cut the grass, our nuisance control people. All of those are important as well. The other issue that I'd like to bring before council is something that I think has just come up, and it kind of ties into the last piece of legislation.
Before you go there,
Yeah,
if you don't mind just holding that thought, what Mr. Leonard just talked about on the workforce side, you know, the city of Defiance is an employer like anyone else, in all honesty. We employ some highly technical people in a lot of our divisions, but our seasonal workers, our laborers, like so many people here in town employ. But I will tell you that I think I can use the word crisis. We're in a workforce crisis here in the city. I talk to a lot of different employers that tell me I need 5 employees, I need 10 employees. I had one tell me late last week, 50. They need 50 employees. And these are people that are companies that are actively advertising for help. They have signs on their buildings, they have signs in their yards, soliciting for help. They talk about turning work away because they don't have the people to produce it. I believe they are paying a competitive wage, Mr. Uresti, but it's a situation where, as a community, we need to pull ourselves up and attempt to fill these positions and help these folks out. They're desperate, and if we aren't doing the work here, then it's going to get done somewhere, and that somewhere isn't here, and we need that work to be done here, and we need to think about that. You know, one employer that said, I had 4 people report for work on Wednesday. They worked on Wednesday and only 1 showed back up on Thursday. That, you know, it boggles my mind, if you will, but I only say that to, I guess, emphasize or underline what Mr. Leonard just talked about on the workforce side. It's bad, and we need to work on it.
The other side of that, Mayor, is, you know, you used to, when you was competing with people like us or the trucking company or whoever, you was competing with companies. Now you're competing with the government because they sit home and get everything handed to them. That's the other problem we got right now. So until that's over with, it's not going to change.
you might be very surprised by the number of older people and an older generation of workforce that we have coming to work for us.
Right.
They're older people.
Right. The younger ones,
Yeah,
just, they don't work with me.
it's just true. They're an older group of people, and the key thing is, you know, where you used to be like, okay, we want you here from 5 to 4 o'clock or 8 to 4 or whatever it is. Sometimes you have to get those people to come to work for you when you get to sort of work with them on their hours and what they want to work, and that's the challenges that we have today. Very much different than what it was a number of years ago. Yeah.
You can go on the water now, sorry.
Okay, that's all right.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. It really is, because it's not a isolated case here. It's all over the place.
It's depressing when you talk to these business owners and they're
Yeah.
frustrated, and I feel for them, and, you know, they look to me for, how are you going to attract people to our community so that we have more people to work? And obviously we're working on those things. Council helps all the time, so we'll see.
The final thing that I'd like to talk about tonight is, and I've asked Jennifer English to come and maybe put some details to this next issue, is that we are working with Defiance College on a program, and it's actually an earmark to the government to work with the college and some of their students to help us with this watershed approach, help us with some of the tributaries within the region. And to do that, that award or that grant or that earmark has to be with the city of Defiance. But we've worked a number of, we've actually worked with a number of universities for the last 3 years. We've worked with University of Toledo, Bowling Green. We've gone over and worked with Indiana, Purdue University over in Fort Wayne. And for the longest time, there's sort of been this absence with the college, and I think we want to reach out and we want to work with them as well. This tributary, the confluence of these rivers is right in the backyard of Defiance College, and we want to partner with them. We want to work with them on some of these programs, and we're asking the government for an earmark to do this. And Jen, if you want to maybe explain it a little bit more, but it's important for us to get the right partners here. And we have someone here that's in the education system right in our own backyard, and we want to work with the college to do that. So I think what we would like to do eventually is bring you a resolution of support for the program. I think we're going to try to do that next week if we can, but I wanted to get it out there because it's a great program. It's if we can pull it off, it would be a great opportunity for us to work with our local college here and some of the students. And what's better is it's right in the backyard of where these tributaries meet, and this college can help us try to achieve our goals for a consent order. So Jen, why don't you?
Yeah, so Mayor, I don't know if you want to talk about sort of the last minute changes that we're looking at that initially.
Well, on the earmark side, originally, President Mankey at Defiance College has a close friend that works in Washington on the lobbying side. His name's Bobby. I'm sorry, his last name escapes me right now.
Mills.
What is it?
Robert Mills.
Robert Mills, right, correct, thank you. I knew you'd be able to fill in the blanks. And so we've been working on this here for a couple weeks, maybe, Jen? And going along well. And then today, it was discovered that the college indeed could not be the one requesting this earmark, that it had to come from a municipal government such as us. So we've switched things. We had letters of support written from us supporting the college's efforts in this. And we're going to have to look at those letters of support, but our deadline is Thursday. And that's why we asked Jen to come tonight to talk about partnering with the college. And Jen, go ahead and expand on the fact that the commissioners are involved. We intend to work with our high schools, countywide, for those that are interested in engaging in this, and my guess, they all will be. So
yeah, I think we have, I guess as far as support letters go, that's a good place to start, because I believe, is it okay if I put this down or off to talk? I believe that I know one of the high school superintendents was on spring break last week, but I believe they received support letters from all the county schools, even though Defiance City Schools does not have an FFA program. They were still interested in working with us. The Maumee Valley Planning Organization submitted a support letter. Defiance County Commissioners submitted a support letter. And we've been working with a lot of these folks in the county, especially on different initiatives, on water quality monitoring initiatives. So there's really 3 parts to the initial proposal, and we may have to adjust it a little bit based on the new requirement for the city requesting the money. But basically, the first piece of it was a permanent, the way it's phrased is a permanent agriculture conservation alliance. So Defiance College would have been, and may still be, the chair of that, co-chaired by the mayor and his team. And then the second piece is a data center, and I'd be glad to answer questions about this, but we'll just kind of give you the initial overview. So that data center was really intended to take the Agriculture Conservation Alliance, collect data. So for example, the college would provide student internships the professors at Defiance College would be working with school students, and they'd be getting out in the field, doing field research, taking equipment, taking buckets, taking water samples out in the community. As part of the partnership with the city, we've already identified clearly that we want to focus on the Upper Maumee watershed, which is covers the area with Hicksville and Sherwood. So there's an important reason for that, because that's where the city gets our drinking water. Every drop of water that we produce here in the city comes from the Maumee River and from the Upper Maumee. So that data center and the Alliance really work together behind the scenes at the college to staff personnel and to get those kids out in the field. And then the third piece is basically to start having this annual conference, which we've done some conferences like this in the past, but really establish a permanent conference and a permanent way of educating the public about the work that happens in point A and point B, right? So I don't know if you want me to address anything specifically. If you have questions, it might be easier just to kind of take questions.
I think you're doing a great job, and you're right. Kind of you've piqued their interest, let them ask, everybody ask questions, they ask questions, but understand we're still at the point where we're trying to get the earmark into the bill and then obviously award it. And then once we have the money, then we will be able to see the best way to go about achieving what it is we want to achieve. This could be a real breakthrough for us, and the fact that Defiance College has stepped up and put the staff in place and committed the human resources to get this done, and the educational advantage to our young people in all of our schools around the county is very beneficial, because it's important that they understand on the water quality piece just what it is that we're trying to achieve, because in all honesty, very soon they're the ones gonna have to carry the ball. And Jen's gonna be a great one to facilitate all of this, aren't you?
I mean, I'll be glad to take questions. I think it's coming specifically out of this community project funding. So the idea is that we're really demonstrating the collaboration. It's not just, we've talked a lot about technology, how technology is part of the solution. This is really about education, using the education system that's in place, and then demonstrating that we have a lot of these relationships already. So kind of focusing in and really having a very targeted, focused direction, not just for the city's negotiations and conversations with Ohio EPA, but really getting to the root of the problem from a community standpoint. So.
Mrs. Gretsch.
When you talked about agriculturally, you're saying that the FFA students of the county schools are going to be the ones that are looking into this. So are they going to be looking at even the farmland, making the water go into the rivers?
I think where the samples will be taken. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine.
Go ahead and continue your question.
Well, no, I was just thinking, I know you were talking about the Upper Maumee and the Maumee, and I was thinking more of the tributaries and the creeks and whatever that's coming into it. And I know, I can't remember at Tiffin, wherever we were at, and talking about the rivers and stuff. And and I remember you talking about this, and I think this is a great project. I'm real excited, but are other students besides FFA students that are going to be also included?
Sure, I think that'll be up to the school districts. So if there's a program that we're offering specifically for FFA students, I don't think, for example, Defiance City doesn't have an FFA program. So I think in my mind, it would be an opportunity for any students that were interested to get involved. It might be through their science class.
Right, biology, whatever.
So, and I think, what Defiance College originally prepared and submitted with the help of Mr. Mills was really a concept paper. We've been working on this and talking about it for 3 weeks, so we didn't spend, months and weeks studying it and saying, okay, where are the gaps? But one of the things that we focused on was identifying the gaps and then making sure that we're not duplicating efforts, find out where the opportunities are, find out where the gaps are, and then the schools will identify that as a need. So yeah, that's good. Good point.
Any other questions from council? Mr. Hank?
Yes, funding. Are we looking at grants or possibly grants for the funding of this program? Or would we be able to get it from the county level or maybe Maumee Valley Planning? just looking for resources, funding resources.
Yeah, so I think, if I understand correctly, so this original earmark request, I'm not into federal politics, but I know that, the intent was to ask this, was originally almost a $700,000 request. So I don't know if that'll change, I don't know if that'll stay the same. That'll be determined over the next week, I think, as we finalize this.
Would the EPA be
so
willing
that-
to help us?
That,
No.
request will be going to.
I can answer that.
Yeah, the EPA will not be paying for that, I can almost guarantee.
No, I really think one of our biggest, the thing that's held us back on a lot of this is the money and to some degree the technology.
Mm-hmm.
This fills the money gap, which there's enough money here to assist us on the technology side as well. That's what makes this so exciting. I wish we would have had more time to work on this and prepare properly. In some ways we have. But what we had the opportunity to do here is begin to prove many of our theories about what it is we can do with this watershed approach and green infrastructure. Green infrastructure, I think sometimes, Jen, folks, when we talk about green infrastructure, they're thinking battery-powered cars and windmills and solar fields. That's not what when we talk about. So why don't you just...
Yeah, sure. So our tagline for some of our publications and some of the public education outreach we've done is, Mayor, you talked about this, slow it down, spread it out, soak it in, right? So the difference between stormwater going onto pavement and getting collected and going straight into the river with all the pollutants that go along with it versus directing that into a swale or a rain garden or bioretention like you see on High Street or Deal Park or some of those. And the reason that we got into some of those green infrastructure projects to begin with is because we did get grant money. And now I think they've become kind of a normal part of how we engineer big city infrastructure projects. So green infrastructure can be trees, can be, landscaping plants, but it is basically an engineered solution to help reduce the actual stormwater runoff that goes into the river. So is that what you're looking for?
No, I think, over the years, what we've seen in agriculture is farmers have put tile in their fields and obviously they're doing everything they can to maximize their production because the world's demanding more and more food. And that's great. Farmers need to do that. None of us care to starve to death. But what we're saying is, all right, you're prepping your fields and you're putting that water into the waterways. That's where we want to take over. We don't really want to get too involved at all in how farmers do their business. We want the water when it comes out of that tile and goes into that ditch or waterway and do some creative ways to do what Jen just said. She's pounded it into me now for 5 years and, slow it down, spread it out and soak it in. And that's all there is to it.
Well, those are things that we can do with our own infrastructure within the city, is that green infrastructure piece.
I mean,
When you go out, I'm sorry.
Well, the GAC that we're going to do with the water plant is nothing more than we're spreading that water out and slowing it down and soaking it into a bunch of carbon filters to take the gunk out of it and then run it out through the pipes.
Yeah.
And we just want to do that out in the waterways to make that GAC system much more efficient.
So some of the concern, I know, in working with agriculture and working with, the city getting involved in agriculture, we're not necessarily getting involved in anything that's not already existing. So supporting the efforts of the Defiance Soil and Water District, where I worked for the first 5 years of my position here with this, in partnership with the city. OSU Extension is involved. They've got a site out on county-owned property where they have little, if you drive by out past the airport on 15 and you look to your right as you're going towards Bryan, you'll see 2 little trailers out there. Those little trailers are collecting data from a project that's kind of a research project. The wetland projects that we're doing are research projects, right? So we're trying to figure out how can we settle those nutrients out, how can we create sort of natural systems or ways that we're not in the business of telling farmers how to farm. There's plenty of people that are smarter, and have that information and can help them. But what I think is important is that we're collecting data that affects our drinking water and trying to do early warning system, or find out where is that data useful? Is it useful? Maybe it is useful for farmers, and we'll go through, working with people in the farm community that are already in that business. So if we're collecting data at the water treatment plant to make good decisions about whether or not to pump into the reservoir, that's data that we'll share. We'll collect it and we'll share it. We're not going to tell anybody what to do with it. So I just want to be clear that that's not the intent, but to educate kids. And I think there's a lot of new emerging technologies for farmers, for FFA or other students to get involved in and to be aware of. So I think in a perfect world, there's probably even some sort of workforce development or some, they talk about future friendly farming, or sort of what are the new technologies that farmers are going to need. I know there's programs in neighboring states that shall remain nameless, that are working with universities trying to get kids out of the take them off the farm, give them some technical training in a 2-year college, and then bring them back to the farm and say, oh wow, look, because saving nutrients and keeping the nutrients in the runoff in the field also saves farmers money in a lot of cases. Not always, but so looking for places where there's win-win, like I said, where there's opportunities. And a lot of that will get figured out by this alliance, by the creation of, a lot of the folks that we're asking support letters from are also being asked to participate in this Watershed Advisory Council. And the way this original document was structured is that would be chaired by the mayor, and it would be basically in concert with our watershed plan that we're developing for EPA.
And the bottom line is we want to bring this legislation and resolution next week for the support of that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
And I want Mike Saxon, Paul Flathman, and Jerry Fensler to know I was paying attention in science class.
I'll still say.
Thank you. We'll probably
Thank
see
you.
next week.
Anything else, Mr. Leonard?
That's it. Thank you so much.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Thank you. I'd like to request an executive session to consider information related to the marketing plan, specific business strategy, production techniques, trade secrets, or personal financial statements of an applicant for economic development assistance, where both involve public infrastructure improvements or the extension of utility services that are directly related to an economic development project, and where a unanimous quorum of the public body, that's you, determines by roll call that the executive session is necessary to protect the interests of the applicant for such economic development assistance.
So
121.22G8.
Thank you. So we have a request for executive session. Do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
A motion. And do we have a second? Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Resty?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mr. Mast?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
And we will have an executive session shortly after citizens' concerns. Mr. O'Donnell?
Thank you. I'd like to request a motion for an executive session to consider the purchase of property for public purposes, Ohio Revised Code, Section 121.22G2. I don't mince words.
No. So do we have a motion for a
I'll
second?
make that motion.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Mast?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mr. Resty?
Yes.
All right. And we will have a second executive session.
That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Mr. Leonard?
Just one quick update. When we last met 2 weeks ago, I had expressed to council that the city's income tax due date remained at April 15th, in keeping with the state of Ohio, who had not yet responded to the federal government's change in the due date. And of course, the very next morning, state of Ohio changed their mind. So our due date for income taxes is no longer April 15th, it'll be May 17th. That's all I have.
I thought of you the very next morning.
Exactly.
He was just saying. All right, thank you. This evening for our consideration, we have 5 items of legislation. Ms. Elders is not here this evening, so you're gonna have to put up with me reading the captions, unfortunately. But first up on our ordinances is a second reading. An ordinance authorizing the expansion of the Defiance outdoor refreshment area, making certain findings and determinations, and enacting regulations to that effect. Now, typically, we save citizens' concerns for the end of our meetings, but because we've suspended the rules for guests coming in and speaking to certain ordinances, we've made them the promise that if they email or send letters or messages, that we would address them, seeing that at any point during the readings, that these ordinances could go to a vote in order to make good on our promise to have citizens hear their concerns. I'm asking council members, have you received any letters or messages or texts that you would like to share towards this ordinance before we actually get down to discussing it? Mrs. Crutch.
I received quite a few texts and a couple letters. I did receive 2 voicemails and 4 phone calls of opposition to the DORA, but they were just citizens that wouldn't give me their names. But I'll read these letters that they did. First one's from Angie and Ryan Sukup, 308 West 3rd Street. The DORA expansion is a great opportunity for Defiance, and for many reasons. The increased area provides more possibilities for festivals or events. The current designation limits the venue from these organizations in that it is congested in those areas. Expansion of the district to an open park setting is very tranquil. Having my residence in a current district, I have not witnessed any negative side effects pertaining to the rules of this area. This all in turn will lead to a more progressive lifestyle, an increased amount of financial prosperity for business taxes, and etc. The other one was Richard and Angie Mojica, 2191 Royal Oak Avenue. I would like council to consider going for the DORA to include all and D-Town. People have been pretty respectful of it so far. There will always be that one person who could mess it up for everyone. Then I have, told you they were dinging a lot today. Mary Boyd, 1906 Edgewood Drive. I want you to know that I fully support expansion of the DORA district. I think it is one of the things that makes our little town unique and progressive and engaging people to spend time and frankly money in our community. The thought of how the expansion could dovetail with some of the cool parks events is really exciting. Thanks for your time and your energy representing the people of Defiance. Also, Mandy Kistner of 2009 South Mistywood Court. This is Mandy Kistner. I wanted to let you know the Next Gen fully supports the expansion of DORA, and we feel it is vital to help the expansion of downtown businesses in the future. I believe our community has responded responsibly and will continue to do so with this expansion. If you would please let other council members know our position, it would be greatly appreciated. Also, oops, wrong one. Oops, calling her. Sorry. Oops. Oopsie. Darn thumbs. My name is Laura Klein. I work downtown at State Bank and I reside at Maywin Drive. I have a 16 and an 18-year-old son that grew up playing baseball. I'm texting to support the DORA expansion. I sincerely enjoy participating in the current refreshment area and look forward to the possibility of going to our parks for events. Our community has shown its maturity in handling DORA as it is, and I anticipate no additional issues. I would appreciate your support in the DORA expansion and encourage you to share my text with other members of council. Please reach out to me for further conversation. And then, sorry, it takes me a while to find these people. Okay, 301 West 3rd, Katie Groff. I wanted to send a note to encourage your consideration of expanding the DORA district. As a frequent DORA participant, this does not attract the types of crowds council is maybe worried about. This actually helps some of the crowding that happens in downtown Defiance that probably normally wouldn't or patronize our businesses. It is a crowd that enjoys the outdoors, and we have minimal bars, restaurants with outdoor seating. Any restaurant near water would tell you location is key. Dora expansion to Kingsbury and Pontiac would provide residents and guests an opportunity to purchase a beverage and enjoy our beautification of parks and waterfront. I would encourage this as an opportunity to look at the positives of community engagement and the potential business growth instead of immediately having council go to the negative of parks, kids, and alcohol. I assure you this is happening already illegally, and Dora would not add to the situation. Then, I think there's one more. Rob Lawson of 420 West First Street. As a resident of the Dora District, I fully support expansion of the district. When I tell out-of-town friends that I both live and work in our Dora District, they immediately get excited to learn what other innovative and progressive things we have going on in our town. As an original member of Mayor McCann's Strategic Planning Committee and as an ongoing Perception Pillar member, I cannot stress how important initiatives and ordinances like this are. Sustainable futures don't exist in enduring climates. Thank you for your time. And that, oh wait, one more. Sorry. Missed her.
You're pretty good with that phone, Mrs.
Yeah, you are good.
I know. Mary Boyd, 1906 Edgewood Drive. I want you to know that I fully support expansion of the Dora District. I think it is one of the things that makes our little town unique and progressive and engaging people to spend time and frankly money in our community. The thought of how the expansion could dovetail with some of the cool park events, excuse me, is really exciting. Thanks for your time and your energy representing the people of Defiance. That is all of them.
Mr. Rusty? Mr. Corbett? All right. And I have one letter that I was asked to read. It says, Dear Council, good evening and thank you for taking time to listen to this letter. I want to start by stating that I have been a proponent of the Dora laws both in my hometown of Napoleon as well as in Defiance. I think that in a tight geographic area with many businesses and eateries, the Dora laws have served and should continue to help grow our local downtown district. On the other hand, the purpose of this letter is to voice my concern toward a possible Dora expansion here in Defiance. I have read and heard that this expansion could involve moving the boundary a block further south on Clinton Street. This expansion is an area of concern because it involves the business that both myself and Kevin McCann own. Since 2013, we have been tax-paying business owners in the city of Defiance, and we have grown our business, Defiance Physical Therapy, from 2 employees to 10 employees. If the expansion were to extend to the next block to include 875 South Clinton Street, I have a concern because this expansion involves our medical facility within these new boundaries. Not only would involving a medical facility that abuts other businesses promoting the applicability of the Dora ordinance to be unprecedented here in Defiance, but it could be reckless. The cause for concern lies in the fact that allowing people to have an open container through our parking lot, sidewalks, and campus could endanger the flow of traffic in and out of an already bustling parking lot. I trust that the use of an open container law would be used in an appropriate manner by people within Defiance, but I fear that it would only take one unintentional incident in our parking lot to cause major liability issues both for us and the city of Defiance. Please let this letter serve as an official notice of my concerns for the expansion of the Dora ordinance. Thank you again for your time. Sincerely, Ryan Crandall, physical therapist, Defiance Physical Therapy. And so if there are other citizens' concerns on this issue or other issues, please feel free to contact me or your local ward councilman or the at-large councilman. But I'm sorry, I told myself, don't forget to read the letters. So I walked right on top of you, Mr. O'Donnell. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no problem, Mr. President. They said it better than I ever could. All of them, pro and con. What you have before you is the application for the expansion of the existing Dora, obviously. It will correlate with the proposed expansion of the revitalization district. And then upon passage, if it passes, the council clerk, she doesn't know this yet, but she will forward your approval to the Division of Liquor Control at Department of Commerce pursuant to 4301.82 F3. And so this is a second reading. Your options are to let the bill lay for a third reading. You can refer the bill to the designated liaison member pursuant to Rule 8. You can table the bill, or you can amend the bill, or make a motion to suspend the rules and adopt. So those are your options.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments, Mr. Oresti?
Yeah, I have two thoughts that I'd like to state. First one is, like last week, I'm opposed to this the expansion of the Dora district to include both parks. And the reason is because, in my opinion, alcohol parks and children shouldn't mix. That's number one. And second, my thoughts are that I would like to propose a motion to exclude any land over both the rivers from the Dora district, which cuts it out from this language, but include extending the language south to the railroad tracks to bring in the D-town. But anything over the rivers, take out. That's my motion.
So we have a motion to amend the ordinance to exclude anything past the bridges, the Clinton Street Bridge and the Second Street Bridge, but to make sure to include the expansion south to the railroad tracks.
Right.
Do we have a second for the motion?
I'll second it.
Second, Mr. Waxler. I'm working on the paperwork here. That's
I'm sorry, does that exclude or exclude the bridges themselves, Mr. Oresti?
Exclude.
Exclude.
all right. Mr. Corbett,
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch,
No.
Mr. Engel,
No.
Mr. Mast,
No.
Mr. Hancock,
No.
Mr. Waxley. Big pardon?
Yes.
All right, that motion does not carry.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just assumed it was a yes. That's a yes. And that is 4-3. So, with everyone voted, that motion does not carry. Do we have any other questions or comments? Mrs. Crutch?
I agree with you as far as children and alcohol do not mix, and that's why I think Kingsbury should not be included. But when I think of Pontiac Park, I don't think of that as a playground type park. It is more of a sitting, relaxing, tranquil type of park. So that's why I think that Pontiac could really be included, especially since Spanky's is right there, and I could see somebody strolling across, sitting on the swings and enjoying their beverage and heading back. But I do understand the Kingsbury because that one is children related because it has a playground. You know, there's really no playground at Pontiac Park, and it's just the swings and a gazebo. So I see more of that kind of aspect. That's just my comments.
Okay. Mr. Mast?
The only comment I have is that I think there's a huge misunderstanding regarding the intent of DORA and what it is attempting to accomplish. And then some of the letters mentioned concerts and different festivals, and Mrs. Mack can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think those things are covered under DORA. Those would be separate on their own permitted events.
It would depend on the activity. If we'll put an example out there, if we decided to have an event specifically in downtown, you could have Dora Cups within that district right now. Let's say an event would like to be held at Pontiac Park, and if the expansion would to go to that area, the Ohio Revised Code does state at this point now that an F permit, which would be a temporary permit through the Division of Liquor Control, could be obtained to be able to have, so let's say an let's say the brewery, come down and set up a nice space to be able to do that in those areas. So it could happen, but it is not designated for concerts, events, or festivals. It is definitely much more of a strolling, everyday kind of activity, and it is not, the goal of it is not to have a rage party every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Thursday, whatever. Much more just to be able to grab a beverage and stroll along our riverfronts.
I guess my secondary point is that these concerts and festivals can go on without DORA right now.
Absolutely, they
I
can.
mean, they could happen
Yep.
anywhere, any
Absolutely.
parks. They could get a permit and go do that.
Yep.
So I think there's just a huge misconception of what DORA is about. And it's just more about getting people outside, getting them shopping, getting them walking through town and up and down. It's not, I mean, I've had a beer or two in my day, and I can tell you, you're not gonna get real inebriated out walking around with one glass of beer. It's gonna take you a little effort to do so. So I mean, I would like to make a motion to send and call. No further questions on this.
We have a motion to suspend and call. Mr. Mast? And do we have a second? Mr. Engel? Motion to suspend and call. Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Mast?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
No.
Mr. Uresti?
No.
And Mr. Corbett?
No.
Okay, that is 4-3.
I have a comment.
Mr. Uresti?
I think one of the things is that a lot of people, if you look at the alcoholism portion of enabling people to have drinks, what is the limitations? And in today's world, you know, we come in like General Motors, we come in like a lot of manufacturing. There's a lot of problems that are taking place with people who do have alcoholic issues. And the thing that I look at, like I said, these things don't mix. What we can look at it as saying one or two. It doesn't stop with one or two. A lot of times people will have it until they are inebriated. And I just look at it that we don't have to be the ones that basically permit this. As far as something, if we can avoid something, let's avoid it. The parks are still gonna be there, they can still enjoy the parks, they can still enjoy the events, they can still enjoy the families. But I think the thing that comes down to it is, it isn't with the lead with the alcoholic beverage in hand because you're gonna go have a family event. That's my thoughts.
Mr. Waxler?
You know, when I first agreed with this DORA, I agree with it because it was downtown, it was to help the merchants, it was to get people downtown, and now we're just trying to spread it out. So we're really going opposite of what we originally did here. And I think when you start taking it across the rivers, I still say that by the time somebody gets the door cup, I don't care if it's a Spanky's, by the time they get to Pontiac Park, it's gone. So if they're gonna drink, they're gonna have a cooler over there and just keep going. I mean, I know what I would do if I wanted to do it. So, you know, we're doing the opposite of what I think of what we really intended this to be. Like I said, I didn't have a problem with going to D-Town because they have quite the food vendors and it's a closer walk. But there again, somebody gets a beer at Kistler's, by the time they get D-Town, it's gone. I mean, I don't care who you are, they're gonna drink at 12 ounce or whatever before you get to there. So I just don't see any sense of moving it out of town. I think downtown's what it was designed for, and that's where it should stay. So,
Mrs. Crutch?
Christie, is that a time limit when they can stop selling the Dora cups?
Everything has to be like midnight. They have to be cleared out by 1 a.m. So they have to stop selling at midnight. By 1 a.m., they can no longer be on the street. That is how the original application was written.
Mr. Esty?
What size are the cups?
16 ounce?
So can they hold liquor?
They can.
Okay, so somebody fills up with 16 ounces of liquor from wherever and they're traveling. I mean, is there harm? We talk about a cup of beer, but this is the potential is it's not just a cup of beer. It's whatever they can get in wine, liquor, and, beer. So there is in my opinion, there's a potential, some problems there. So that's just my thoughts.
Mr. Engel?
Kirsty, isn't the parks limited to dusk to dawn
They are.
instead of to midnight?
Yep, that is correct.
And you
It would
said
work
they
just
were-
like Mr. O'Donnell explained, was that 2 weeks ago? It feels like much longer than that, but
And
2 weeks ago.
you were saying the door cup 16 ounces?
They are.
There's no way, and you know what, that they'll get 16 ounces of liquor in that thing.
And I was gonna make a
80% of that's gonna be pop, water, or whatever.
Mr.
My
Uresti, the establishments still have to obtain the liability for the beverages that they serve. So there would not be any establishment that would fill a 16-ounce cup with straight liquor to send out their door, because that is a major liability issue on their end. They wouldn't serve that to anybody within their establishment. They would definitely not let 1 cup of that leave their establishment in that manner.
Mr. Corbett?
Is there any liability issue for the Dora District or the city itself for that? A 16-ounce cup of beer, if you drink it in 5 minutes, your blood alcohol level is probably over the legal limit, depending on how big you are. If you're Sean's size, it might be twice the legal limit.
I'm kind of a lightweight.
Is there a liability issue for the city or the Dora District?
No. Ohio Revised Code, section 274402 issues a blanket immunity for political subdivisions. But there are 5, they list 5 exceptions. None of those 5 is the operation of a DORA. You're talking about things like gross, willful, wanton negligence on the part of, like police officers or things like that, or defects in city facilities or in roadways. Those are the kinds of things we would fear with liability.
Okay, well, you have no immunity or no liability as a government agency. We don't have it if somebody in a city truck runs over a car either, but we sometimes make those people whole. Yes or not?
You, as council, have the authority to grant that where you think there's a situation where the city has a moral authority or moral obligation to make that whole. It's called a gratis payment. You have that obligation, but it has to come before you as legislation, so you'd have to approve it.
And by extension, it could roll into a Dora District of somebody that was inebriated and got in their car and left and run over some kid crossing the street. That's probably a bizarre example, but that kind of theory can still apply. And again, 16 ounces of beer, if you put it down pretty quick because you don't want to carry it across the bridge, you probably exceeded the legal limit. So I'm not for this in the park system. I will continue to vote no. I understand I'm probably in the minority in this because that seems to be the way the council's going, but I disagree with allowing it in the park system. It's just a can of worms I don't want to open up.
Any other comments?
Over here.
Nope. Mrs. Crutch?
Yeah, I have talked to Ms. Mack, and one thing nice too with the Dora expansion, once we do it, we can always take things back if there's a negative or if there's issues going on. I forgot to read one of the letters from Ben Mitchell. My apologies to Ben. He has 2 businesses downtown that he's just establishing. He's real excited about being a part of the Dora with both of those businesses that are right downtown beside Meeks. I've also talked to many of the business people downtown, that some are for and some are against, and I personally don't drink. So You know, when I think of this, I'm thinking of the constituents that have talked to me, have asked me, you know, I can give my personal opinion. I agree, I'm not real gung-ho on Kingsbury Park, but I really don't have an issue with Pontiac. But we'll see what happens. If Kingsbury gets to be real bad, then we take it away, or Pontiac or whatever.
Mr. Corbett?
Well, the downside to that is you only have two opportunities, right, Christie, to
True.
expand
That,
or take it away. Two shots at this to get it right.
that actually was a piece of the old legislation.
Yep.
Went away, huh?
This has all been updated very recently. So that piece was a piece that was omitted, that I was not aware had been omitted. And actually, we found that out because another community made a statement in their local newspaper, and we read it and kind of jumped the gun and said, well, hold on a second, what do you mean you can amend it as many times as you want? That's not right. So we did some more research and found out that that had been omitted. So we have the opportunity to do this as many times as you guys want to see my lovely face.
We always enjoy having you, but one more comment. I also, you know, I hear what you're saying about your constituents. Mine are the other side of the coin, okay? Call after call, email after email. Some of them don't want to share it because they're afraid if their name gets out there, people will call them older than dirt or old fuddy-duddies or whatever, right? They're just the older part of this community that doesn't want this kind of activity, that doesn't think it needs to be in our parks. So this isn't as cut and dried as everybody wants to make it. So again, thank you. I'll be quiet now.
Mrs. Crutch?
Well, to go along with her, the mayor sent us the letter about the blade, and it was Sylvania School, or Sylvania District that talked about it. And I know I had asked the mayor, I said, I thought we could only amend it twice. And he says, no, you can do it a lot more times. So that is kind of nice to know that if we are having major issues, we can come back and just cut it off and stop. You know, and the people will learn, but you know, rules are rules. Look at how many people don't follow speed limit rules down my road, you know, or people don't follow rules about picking up trash in our parks. And things that are, you know, I'm hoping people will follow the rules of the door the way they're supposed to. Just like I hope that then they drive down Wayne Avenue, that they drive 25. They don't do it, you know.
It's an enforcement issue. I will comment on that article, and it was well written, but I noticed Sylvania took the time to send out a questionnaire to their community before they decided to do anything with it. We didn't do that. Okay.
You're right.
So,
That's a good point.
If I may,
Yes.
I just kind of want to put myself in you folks' shoes, and I know these are difficult decisions, but this is the process that we have in place. And let me just say, in the 5+ years that I've been mayor, and even before that, as a community, we've done things, and the amount of hand-wringing that goes on in my office and in Board of Control meetings about, well, if we do this, what could the effect be? My biggest concern with all the improvements that we've made in the park, dating back to when we did Kids Creation 20 years ago, was that the community wouldn't appreciate what's been done for them, and we would have vandalism issues. And let me say that right now, vandalism issues have been few and far between, and thank you to the community for that. But I think if the DORA expansion is approved, it's another test that we're issuing to our community. We're doing this. Can you act responsibly, yes or no? Because if the answer to that is no, and they can't act responsibly in our parks around younger people, then we'll take that privilege away. I'll be the first one to ask Mr. O'Donnell to draft legislation shrinking the DORA back down, because we won't tolerate that. We just won't. But again, I've been very proud of the community as to how we've handled a lot of the improvements that we've made. And I know they speed down your street. I'm sorry. I set my cruise control.
Good boy.
Mr. Waxler?
What are you gonna do with the signs that say no alcohol in the parks?
Take them down.
Okay, so now anybody.
I mean, that's what you're gonna have to do.
You're opening it up.
No, Mr. Waxler, we would put up signs that state that only, you may want to word it, Mr. O'Donnell, be something like only DORA containers are allowed. There will still be people that are gonna break this rule. We know that. It's being broken
So
now.
don't even give them the option. And that's what we're doing. We're giving them the option to do that.
But Mr. Waxer, they're breaking it now, are they not? I think everybody around this table has admitted that there's alcohol currently being consumed in our parks.
I never said that.
Again, that's an enforcement issue though. If we enforce that rule, maybe that wouldn't happen.
Okay?
Mr. Hancock?
If we allow the Dora district to be in the parks, we also have park hours, okay? Even though they're in they have a Dora cup, I'm not allowed to be on the property after dusk, is that correct?
That's correct.
So I'm limiting my ability to be at the park during sunlight. And also, I support Mayor and I support Mrs. Crutch as well. You're only allowed to get a cup through the current establishments. I'm not able to go down to, the D-Town and get a Dora cup because they're not a distribution. Also, if you have a vendor, are vendors allowed to distribute, let's say, I have a hot dog stand. Can I distribute alcohol through there? It's only the establishments that we currently have, correct?
Correct.
Unless another establishment comes in, let's say that Family Video, where Family Video used to be, it becomes a restaurant and they distribute, then they qualify for a Dora at that time.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Because I think in the park situation, we are limiting people, even though we're allowing the alcohol to be there in a cup. You're gonna have abusers. Perfect example, the local paper, okay? We had the Toledo to Fort Wayne, the commercialization of allowing us to have easier access. Well, when you put that in, it also allows illegal activity to happen. We have more narcotics coming back and forth. We also have that. It didn't stop them. You're gonna have those abusers. But, I mean, I like an adult beverage once in a while too. I'm similar to what Mr. Waxer says. If I go into the establishment, like for Spanky's, I'm gonna have it finished by the time I get to the other side of the bridge. Not that I'm gonna gulp it down, but there's also that space. So that's why I support what we're doing here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mast?
I think one of the best comments I've heard on this conversation throughout came from somebody, I won't say who, but the more people we have in the parks doing legal activities and taking up space in the park, the more it's gonna drive out people that are showing up to do illegal activities. I mean, it's, the more people you have getting out use the parks, that they're doing things the way they're supposed to be doing it, you know, the better off they'll be there.
Good point. Okay, Mr. Esty?
I just think, we just need to be conscious that what's going on in our communities, that it's a changed culture. What somebody does isn't gonna prevent somebody else from not doing it. There's a lot of people that just don't want somebody to tell them no. And we read about it, we see it in the news all the time, and it's prevalent at this point. And I don't believe it's one of those things that if you're surrounded by 12 people, that's gonna prevent you from doing what you wanna do. And there's not gonna be any shame in what they do. So, my thoughts.
Any other comments? Right. What are council's wishes?
Did you have enough votes to suspend and call?
They did, you did
Okay.
not. It takes 6 votes. to
Take 6
suspend the
votes.
rule.
It went 4-3. So with
Has
that,
to come back for the third reading.
Well, you have to take some action.
Okay, I make a motion to let it lie.
so we have a motion to let lie. Second, Mr. Hancock?
And I will second that.
All right. Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Mast?
Yep.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mr. Esty?
No.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
And Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
All right. We will let this lie and visit it next time. Next up, for first reading, an ordinance authorizing a contract for the reconstruction of the Ottawa Avenue and Cleveland Avenue intersection and declaring an emergency. Mr. O'Donnell.
Mr. President, back in 2017, when everybody hated roundabouts, the Ohio Department of Transportation identified this intersection in particular as the 10th highest crash location in our 5-county region. That's Defiance, Fulton, Paulding, Napoleon, and one of those other counties. But with the new school building, or new school campus, the East Side Park, you've got like the nicest looking Dollar General you've ever seen. The B&B Molded Products building and expanding and continuing to expand. You're just gonna have increasing traffic there and increasing odds of the collisions. And in fact, we had a fatal motorcycle accident there also in 2017. So Ohio Department of Transportation has made about $2.3 million available in grants, and actually that's from 4 different sources, but ODOT is one of those sources. The lowest and best bid to construct a roundabout and some pedestrian improvements came in at about came in right at 2.4 million. That's $2,421,699.17. And again, this would convert that intersection into a roundabout, have shared use paths, pedestrian facilities. You already approved some permanent property acquisitions from the adjacent businesses. But this legislation in particular is an emergency request due to the requirements of Ohio Revised Code Section 153.12A, where we would, as a city, have to award the bid within 60 days of opening the bid, or we have to rebid it.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. O'Donnell?
No question or discussion, most suspend and call.
We have no questions. We have a motion to suspend and call. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Mast. Mr. Mast?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mr. Uresti?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
And Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Right.
Motion to adopt, Mr. President.
Motion to adopt. Mr. Corbett, and do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Hancock. Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mr. Uresti?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Mast?
Yes.
This ordinance is adopted. All right. Third up, an ordinance authorizing a contract for the construction of pickleball courts at Kingsbury Park and declaring an emergency. Mr. Leonard.
I got it, thank you. Back in the fall, when we were talking about the 2021 budget, this was an item that was included and approved as part of the permanent improvement or the capital budget. It's the conversion of the tennis courts in Kingsbury Park to pickleball courts. We budgeted $100,000 for this. At the time, we believed that we would be able to generate about $75,000 in private donations. And we are awfully close. Some outside parties, including the Defiance Area Foundation and others. We have received and/or received pledges for, to date, $73,000, and there's a couple of more requests out there. So we believe they will hit their $75,000 commitment. That would have left the city with $25,000 to pay, and again, it was a $100,000 estimate. That's what we budgeted. The quote came in at $110,874, so the city would actually be in for a little over $10,000 more than we had originally budgeted. But the efforts of the citizens groups who have been out and raised money quite honestly exceeded, even though we put 75,000 in the budget, I wasn't sure we were gonna get there, so. Anyway, it would be the administration's recommendation that we move forward with this project.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Leonard?
No further questions, motion to suspend the call.
Motion to suspend and call. Second, Mr. Corbett. Mr. Waxler.
Yes.
Mr. Oresti.
Yes.
Mr. Corbett.
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch.
Yes.
Mr. Engel.
Yes.
Mr. Mast.
Yes.
Mr. Hancock.
Yes. But can I make a short comment? I want to thank the donors for contributing to this project. That's helped us tremendously.
If I can follow up on that, I can provide you with a little bit of a list. I won't go into the dollar amounts, but we have healthy contributions from the Defiance Area Foundation, Defiance County Commissioners, ProMedica, Defiance Regional Hospital, the Caressel Foundation, actually Mayor Mike and Lori McCann, Bashar and Monica Canoe, Randy and Chris Yoder, and there are pending asks with the Defiance Moose Lodge and the Hubbard Family Foundation. If there are others out there, there might be, but this is the complete list that I have as of this moment. So, great point. I should have read the names. A big thank you to all of them.
Thank you.
If I did, it's not just the pickleplex that folks have stepped up, but all the soccer work being done down on Riverside was partially funded by donations. We met with the girls softball folks a couple weeks ago. They've raised a significant amount of money for some much needed and some desired improvements out there. The DBA is going to be doing some work later this year at Kingsbury Park and going to make a pretty nifty backstop. And so it's just project after project after project after project that both public, our money here, taxpayer money, as well as private donations. And it's does my heart good.
And so we've had a motion to suspend and call pass.
Motion to adopt.
Mr. Corbett.
Second.
Mr. Oresti.
Yes.
Mr. Corbett.
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch.
Yes.
Mr. Engel.
Yes.
Mr. Mast.
Yes.
Mr. Hancock.
Yes.
And Mr. Waxler.
Yes.
Right. This ordinance is also adopted. Next up, for first reading, an ordinance directing the city administrator to submit a revolving loan fund waiver request for the demolition of the structure on the 100 block of Clinton Street and declaring an emergency. Mr. Leonard.
I think that's,
Mr. O'Donnell is what I meant.
he's the next one. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. With the miles of road construction going on in our streets and the pickleball complexes, courts, and all the construction going on all over town, we thought it would be helpful for your constituents to have one more demolition project to maneuver around. And so our goal is to demolish the buildings, most of the buildings on the 100 block of Clinton Street. It's no secret that we've wanted to bring those buildings down for some time. They're in the floodplain. There was a complicating factor in that there is a business there that's doing pretty well, the Spanky's Bar. We've talked about it at length already tonight. And we didn't want to force that business to relocate. It matters where you have your small business, especially in that kind of strategic area. But that decision to keep them in place, to keep Spanky's there, required a more complex demolition plan than just, in other words, they weren't just going to be able to tear it down and go into Spanky's and call it a day and have a beer. It required something called a parapet wall, because if you just tear it down and just have the wall there that's not used to being exposed to the elements, wasn't built for that reason, for that purpose, you're going to have water collect where water shouldn't be collecting. It's anybody's guess how that building or how that formerly interior wall is going to react to wind and other elements. It was just something that requires additional support. So those additional costs exceeded what you had budgeted last fall, and as well as what we were able to obtain in grants from the Ohio Emergency Management Agency. So the total cost, and this is an estimate, this is the architect's estimate, it could be more, it could be less, but it's gonna be around $280,973. And your approval of this legislation would just authorize the administrator to ask to use the revolving loan funds. A lot of those monies originate from Ohio Development Service Agency administered funds, so we have to ask their permission to use it for this purpose.
Mr. Hancock?
In the first initial bidding process, what was that amount that was estimated for the engineering?
I only have the architect's estimate. I don't know what we budgeted last year.
And the reason I'm asking is the 280 that we're currently looking at, is that on top of what we've already guesstimated?
When we purchased the property,
Mm-hmm.
and this would just be the cost for the demolition. And because of the unique circumstance of trying to preserve one of the buildings, the demolition cost is higher than what is left available in the FEMA grant.
Okay,
So the reason for requesting the $100,000 waiver out of RLF is so that we can provide the funding that, again, that FEMA grant has come up short because of.
so we're looking at just the additional 100,000,
Up to 100,000.
up to an additional 100,000, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. O'Donnell? Good, then what are council's wishes on this issue?
No further questions. Motion to suspend and call.
Motion to suspend and call. Mr. Mast?
Second.
Second, Mr. Hancock. Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Mast?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mr. Resty?
Yes.
Great.
Motion to adopt.
We have a motion to adopt and a second.
Second.
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Mast?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mr. Resty?
Yes.
And Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
All right. This ordinance is also adopted. And our last item for legislation this evening, for first reading, an ordinance authorizing a contract for continued monitoring of flow meters throughout the city's sewer system. This time, Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that. A couple weeks ago, I think we had before council an ordinance for Strain and Associates for monitoring and modeling. And in this case, what you're seeing, we actually got a proposal from this particular company that you're seeing in this piece of legislation today, Xylem. But Xylem has always done flow monitoring for us, and they will continue to do flow monitoring for us. As a matter of fact, we'll change some of that flow monitoring in some of these areas where we will look at measuring the flows in our sewer system will be Sunday Street, Riverside Avenue, Summit Street, Vassar Drive, Clinton Street, East River Drive, and River Drive. And what we're asking council tonight to do is to continue that relationship with Xylem and continue to monitor and continue to actually collect the data, which will be important in making decisions. Xylem will actually be doing the monitoring and they'll be responsible for the data. Strand and Associates will be putting it in a model and looking at different scenarios to see where we need to make significant changes, whether it's changing weir height within the infrastructure or just making good choices with information. And I think that that's been the whole crux behind our overall plan. Let me say this because I think this is sort of, you need the information to make good decisions, and that's what this piece of legislation allows. But I think earlier tonight, you heard from a number of people. We talked a little bit earlier about Defiance College and how they could play an important role, how students could play an important role in our program. I think earlier we talked about even on the pickleball court, you're seeing numerous people step up and they're actually participating in creating what would be considered to be this public-private partnership. And if you really want to know the truth, that's the recipe for success for anything that we do. When you have people participate, you can get a lot more done. I mean, we can sit here and pass pieces of legislation, but when you have people that are interested in what you're doing and they're going to financially participate, I think certainly that is a recipe for success. We talk about, and it's a good story. The story is today it's the pickle courts and you see all these nice donations, but don't forget that you're seeing some revitalization on the east side as well. And you're seeing people, we're meeting with people over on that side to talk about their neighborhoods. And I don't really want to go off tangent, but I think the one thing that I just want to reinforce is that we need information to make choices. And when we have that information, we can partner with people to help us. And it's all part of what I think will be a success story for our community in achieving what we need to do on this CSO and this mandate. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Mr. Esty?
We've been using the flow meters since about 2013.
Oh, yeah.
Right in that area.
Yeah.
And we've collected a lot of useful information over the years. And with the collection of that information and how we've utilized it, has it saved our city money?
Oh, I think it saved us a tremendous amount of money. I think that when I first came to the city in '92, the only thing we knew about the plant. We knew about the process at the plants, with the water plant, the wastewater plant. We never knew anything about our water lines and the flow rates and things like that. We didn't know anything about really the sewer infrastructure, how the sewer flowed in it, where it was maybe leaking and getting inflow and infiltration. Today, we have that information. So the absolute truth of that is, yes, we've saved money. How much money? I don't think that you can really measure it. It's immeasurable, really.
And the money that we did spend, we spent wisely in that the flow monitoring helped us identify what Mr. Leonard's frequently called our low-hanging fruit. That is, where can we spend money and have the most impact on those things that you just identified? Yeah.
We've gone into the system and actually changed wear heights to see how much storage you can actually get into the system, where before we had no idea what we could do there. And today, we have so much better information about what we can store within the system, what you can release, when you can release it. And part of it is what we call real-time monitoring. It's actually watching it take place and these systems filling up as they're occurring during a rain event. We never had that before. And you can make better decisions when you have that kind of information.
And these systems are getting better.
Yeah.
As they're being used and placed.
Yeah.
And giving us the feedback.
And technology's doing so much more for us today than it ever has done before. It's pretty amazing when we used to have 4 meter readers in this city, and today those meters are read by downloading it straight into the computer. You didn't have that before. And you know what? You paid 4 people's salaries with that, and some people, you've actually become more efficient in the operations. All of them. Wastewater, water, and it's actually a good story.
Do we have any other questions for Mr. Leonard? What are council's wishes on this issue?
No further questions. Motion to suspend the call.
We have a motion to suspend and call, and do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Mast?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mr. Esty?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
And Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
And do we have a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt?
And second? Second. Mr. Mass?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mr. Uresti?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
And Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Right, and this ordinance is also adopted. With our legislative items for this evening addressed, I know we took citizens' concerns in regards to the first ordinance that we addressed, but there are other issues other than just that in front of us. Does any member of council have a citizen's concern they were asked to address before we move on to executive session? Mr. Corbett?
Not a message, but a question. Are we at a point in time in our coronavirus pandemic where we can begin to think about allowing the public back into this council chamber?
If you're asking us, there would be no objection from the administration.
Then council's wishes on that would be
Right.
appreciated.
I don't know what the guidelines are, the protocol is right now, but I know we're having planning for May 4th to have a presentation come in. That may be the time that we could possibly start with the public input.
I've seen standards getting relaxed. I know that the Bryan community's opened it up to the public now. Only because my daughter is up there, but it's just might be time. We've kept them out. They've done a great job communicating the best we can, but they might be missing the opportunity that they deserve to be back in here. So it might be time to consider it.
Right, that would be something, I know Indiana has relaxed quite a bit. I don't know as of today what the current word from Columbus is, or do you know what the current state of affairs is?
And I know that an amended order just came out either yesterday or today, Mr. President, but I was also gonna point out, Mr. Corbett, you and all of council have voted to suspend certain rules regarding public participation. And so it would ultimately be up to you to rescind that suspension. I think those expire at the end of June anyway, but you certainly have, I mean, a majority of you certainly have the authority to rescind that suspension of the rules and allow the public back in. But even if you did that, you would still be subject to whatever health directives are coming from the governor's office or the Ohio Department of Health.
Right, I had seen something and then yesterday or today, and I had not had time to review it.
I can review it and get back with you next week.
Would you?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm eager, as soon as is responsible, to have guests come and be able to speak. I do want to make sure that it's one step and not say a step that has to be undone only to be done again. But that is a good suggestion. Thank you, Mr. Corbett. Right. We do have 2 executive sessions. Mrs. Crutch.
I forgot one of the letters and better not miss his name, but it's
Your phone
Ben.
dead yet?
Yeah, Ben Mitchell, I know, Ben Mitchell, 319 and 321 Clinton Street. He's the owner of Cell Phone Repair Defiance LLC and the building Rochelle's Kids Boutique. Anyhow, I think the expansion of Dora will be great for downtown Defiance. Defiance is about to gain several new businesses. There has been some incredible efforts by so many to bring businesses back to the downtown area. Expanding Dora will help all of the current and new businesses downtown. It will also be exciting to have an expanded area for all the events in downtown that we will all hopefully be able to enjoy this year. Ben Mitchell.
Thank you.
There, I did them all.
So we do have 2 executive sessions. We can stand, stretch our legs for a few minutes, and then we'll enter executive session.
That's okay. Well, I don't know. I know it's not.